In this lesson, we're going to go through and just start blocking in basic shapes. I'm going to get started on a couple of basic color things, and I'm going to show you how to work with layers, how to fill with color, and just a little bit of how I use brushes versus fill and things like that. To start, remember if you open your layers, I have two layers now. I have my thumbnail and my sketch. I'm just going to go ahead and delete the thumbnail layer since I'm done copying everything I want from there. And then I'm going to do the same thing where I tap with two fingers and just bring the opacity of this sketch layer down to about 25%. And then I'm going to create a new layer, and again I just tap and hold on it and then pull it down underneath that one. And in this case it actually is a little bit important that you keep the sketch as the top layer, because otherwise you'll start blocking out pieces of your sketch as you create shapes. At this stage I like to just sort of plan what layers I'll need, and obviously I'll probably end up adding some after that. And I think I can probably just go from there, and I'll add more as I need them. But one thing I did want to show while I have this open is just how you create a layer group. So as I go, I'm probably going to end up with enough layers that it would get pretty confusing, and I'd have background layers mixed with character layers. So I can just take, so I'm going to select each layer I want by swiping towards the right on it. So I have this top layer, the sketch layer, selected, and you can see that it's highlighted blue. And then as I swipe right, these ones will be highlighted a lighter blue, which means that they're not the main layer, but they're also selected. So if I was to draw at this point, it would draw on the sketch layer. But these other ones, if I want to do like a transform or something, so let's say I close that and I want to move everything at once, all of those layers are moving with this. But while they're selected, this top, this little 3 lines button at the top right of your layers panel will just create a layer group really quickly. And then you can collapse that and just keep things a little cleaner that way. So everything related to my character I've put in this group, and then as I create more, I'll probably create a background group as well. And depending on the drawing, I might have more than that, but for now I think that's going to be good. And then I just want to rename this, I don't even know what to call this guy, I'll just call it Guy. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to show you how I would start drawing the body. The way that I do this, and the reason that it's so important to have a detailed sketch to begin with, is that basically I'm doing this drawing again, but just tracing over everything with the selection tool. And again, the selection tool is this little S at the top left. You're going to become very familiar with it because starting here, I use it a lot. So, and for the body layer, I think is what I had selected. And actually I put these in the wrong order. So I want that body layer above the back arm and leg, because this includes the front leg, the front arm, and the head, I think. So I'm going to just grab my selection tool and then start tracing over the outline. You will notice if you turned off the active tool for touch, that doesn't apply to the selection tool, so you could still draw selections with your finger if you want to, even if you've turned that off. You'll notice that I come back and do a little loop sometimes. It's a little bit hard to explain why I do that, but let me just show you. Like, so let's say I'm drawing along and I accidentally went way off over here somehow, and that's not where I want the selection to be. But because I know the whole selection will be in this leg anyway, I found that I can go back and just loop back to where I messed up. And then as I go and then finish it, that whole area will be included in the selection. So this is something that I think you just need kind of a feel for. And the reason I don't just undo is sometimes I've already drawn quite a bit of the line that I am happy with before I get to that point, and I don't want to undo all of the part that did turn out well. So I'm just going to create part of this, and I'll go back, and now you can see all of those places where I did the loops are just included in there, and it's just a way of not stopping the selection that I'm doing or undoing the parts that I like. So like, let's say I'm trying to draw a circle and I go in, I can just kind of loop around, include it, and finish the selection. This doesn't work if you go outside the other way. So like, let's say I'm trying to draw a circle and I go out, I can't do that same loop back because that part is going to be included in the selection. So whatever it is has to be on the inside of the shape you're drawing. And again, this is just something you'll get a better feel for as you use it. This doesn't have to be perfect the first time around. I'll probably come in and end up cleaning up a couple of these edges anyway. But I do want to make it as close as I can at this stage because this is part of the final drawing. but you'll see I kind of came outside there. So in this case, I have to undo. And then I can loop back. And sometimes even when I haven't messed up, I'll loop back just so I can kind of draw along the same line rather than try to just pick up where I left off and end up with kind of a weird little jagged spot. I'm just going to go up and build up that shape. And this will just, by default, add to the shape that you've already created. But let's say I selected a part that I don't want included in there, like this heel is going out just a little bit, right? And this came out just a little farther than I wanted it to, so I can just select that little piece, and then I press the minus. So if you go down to the bottom of the screen, there's a little 2 lines, a plus, a minus, I think that's invert. There's just a couple options here. If you press minus, that's a subtract from selection. Plus is add to selection. So that one is what happens by default when you just close the shape. But minus, you have to go down and press the minus button at the bottom. I'm just going to kind of clean up a couple of the edges. And at this point, I'd also turn off the sketch just so I can see that shape a little more clearly. And that will help me to see the areas that need just a little bit of cleanup. So like here, I've got a little bit of a lump. You will notice I just reloaded my selection. So if, for instance, I went and turned off a layer, turning on and off a layer, you'll notice the selection tools went away from the bottom, and I need those back because suddenly I'm not in selection mode anymore. So to get back into selection mode without losing the selection that you have, you'll notice if I tap it once, the selection I have just gets dismissed. But if I tap and hold on that, then it pulls my selection tools up and keeps my active selection. And that is really, really nice to know. So, because there's nothing worse than losing a selection that you just spent 5 minutes on. Another cool thing about that is even if you've already dismissed the selection and you have done something else, like let's say I start drawing something, I can reload that selection still just by tapping and holding. So that will just always keep the last selection you have active. But I just need to go in and finish up the head. And sometimes I'll just sort of build it up in pieces like this. If there's part of the curve that I've drawn that I'm pretty happy with, and I just want to make sure I get it done before I mess it up somehow, I'll just sort of like build up the selection bit by bit as I go. So there's a couple ways you can fill in this shape, and again, I'm going to turn off the sketch for just a second so we can see what's going on here. But this piece I want to fill in. Let's go just choose a color. I'll refine this a little bit more later, but for now I'm just going to go with kind of a orange or something. There's a couple ways to fill in the color on this. One of them that I'm going to show you is called color drop. Just tap and drag out of that color and you'll see the color kind of comes with you. And then you just drop it where you want. And if you tap and hold without letting go in the area that you want to fill, you can actually adjust the fill threshold. You can just let go and it will fill in that area. You can dismiss your selection and that's all filled with color. And then I'm going to turn on something called alpha lock on this layer. Which means that as I draw, I won't be able to draw outside of any area that's already been drawn in. That may not make a lot of sense, but I think as I show it to you, you'll see what I'm saying. So I'm going to swipe to the right with 2 fingers on that layer, and you'll see a little checkerboard pattern appear in the background of the layer thumbnail. You can also tap on the layer and tap alpha lock in this menu that comes up, or I think I have it set up as one of my quick menu shortcuts. But whichever way you prefer to do that, I really like this swipe with 2 fingers method. Basically, you can go in, choose another color so we can see what's going on here. And then I'm going to choose a brush that's just bigger that I can fill in with, and I'll talk more about these in a second. But as I draw, you'll notice that it doesn't go outside of the layer that I already had there. Or if I turn alpha lock off and do that same thing, it's drawing outside the bounds as well. So this is really nice for adjusting colors, for adding texture, things like that. And then I'll show you how that selection or the color drop threshold works a little bit better here. So now I have a different color. Let's say I want to drop a color on top of that. But as I adjust the threshold, you'll notice that that yellow goes down less and less. But you just have to keep sliding after you've done the drop without lifting your pencil or finger. So I don't actually want that color there, so I'm going to get rid of it. But basically, I'm just going to do this for each section here that I've outlined. Okay, so I have these, the back arm and back leg all selected out. And I've just turned off my sketch. But when I do this, I like to keep the the farther back layers a little bit darker. So I'm actually going to use the eyedropper tool to just sort of select this sort of darker orange from down here. And the way that I did that is I tapped and held this little the little square on the left side of the screen in between the size and opacity sliders. So I held that down with my thumb, and then as I move the pencil, it will just, that's a little modifier button. So I can just choose color with my pencil as I have that held down. Or I can also just tap it once and then it will pull up the color picker as well. And then I'm just going to go in with my pencil and fill these in. So this is, I do this way of filling in a lot just because I get a little more interesting textures that way. For this particular stage, it probably doesn't matter too much because I'm just using one color and I want it to be filled all the way. But if I'm like doing a shape within one of these layers or something, a lot of the time I'll use the brush rather than the fill tool. I'm going to go in and do some of these other things, and again, I'm just going to be drawing for a second as I do that. I think I'm just about done with this, with the shapes section of this. I haven't worried too much about colors because I know I'm going to go and change those quite a bit as I start adding the background in later videos. But I'm going to come back in and do the shadows as well when I do that. But for now, I'm really happy with these shapes, and we can use those to sort of start building the color and the texture and start thinking more about the details.